In that single night, we burned to death 100,000 Japanese civilians in Tokyo, men, women, and children.
Were you aware this was going to happen?
Well, I was part of a mechanism that in a sense recommended it.
I have hit record, but don't feel
like we've actually started.
By all means.
Just because we're recording doesn't mean we've actually started.
Here's the thing, Dan. Here's the thing about people these days. I don't really have anything to say.
No,
it's been a very
really.
depressing week. And
Yeah.
depressing week in the sense of good. I suppose we should bring up the George Floyd cop trial just briefly, to say good. One of these cops has been shown some semblance of justice, but I've just found the whole thing very disgusting. All of it. I mean, obviously, but like media coverage and just like we did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it just
God, mission accomplished.
It does seem like everybody feels that they deserve it in being part of the victory.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And like we solved it.
There's just one bad guy and society has triumphed.
Exactly. And of course, as we all know, Dan, the police departments and the justice system did this not to save any kind of institutional racism or any kind of institutional exploitation, but perhaps to move on, correct? To have new institutions.
What are institutions but collections of individuals?
What? Oh my God, you're blowing my mind. We live under communism.
Did you get the same? We might have to cut this out. You get the same. You get the same email that I got today. My employer felt the need to make a statement.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah, sure. I guess we would have gotten it. I was like, why did we get the same email? I never thought about that.
No, it just struck me as a bit odd. Why?
Did you see that the person that sent it was like? I was like, oh, this must have been from like the big boss, and it was kind of just some person. I was like,
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's odd.
Anyway,
I don't know what the purpose of that email was.
Yeah,
I
was just a bit like I didn't read very much of it, but I was just a bit taken aback. Like, why do you suddenly feel like?
Hang on, is your mic on?
What?
Is
Hey.
your mic on?
Have
Have you turned it on?
It's now off.
Now it's off. Now it's off.
It was doing things.
All right, yeah. Now turn it back on.
It's on. It's on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, just turn it up then.
Just
All right. Ignore what I just did. Ignore that. What were you saying?
So we might have to start again.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? It's been a great week.
We're having a blast.
Having a blast over here,
Best
folks.
week of the year so far.
You know what really bothered me about the whole situation and the world this past week is
nothing too big then.
Nothing too big. Just I think the general like I did see a few takes that were like, you know, I am above all of this. I would never revel in the incarceration of another human being. Sure. And it's just like, go fuck yourself. Like, oh my God. I would never. God bless those people.
Never. Yeah. It could be so ideologically pure.
Yeah. Virtue signaling, perhaps. What's going on here? Say something.
What?
All right. Yeah, you're fine. I don't know. I'm paranoid.
But I just keep. But maybe I'm speaking too quietly. Maybe I need to speak more loudly.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. No, that seems fine. I was gonna keep my eye on it.
That's how they work.
Interesting. I like that. As you noted, and we'll come back to this in a second. As you noted last week, after we stopped recording because we forgot half a year of the show. We'll get back to that. Still haven't figured out how to record.
No, yeah.
Still have no idea.
Yeah. Just before we started recording, I was telling Jack how I'd realised I was talking into the mic wrong last week. So.
Wait, you're supposed to face it? I put mine behind me.
we just don't want to be too professional.
Yeah, we
We
want to
just
keep
need
it.
to maintain some of that sort of amateurist veneer just for a little while, just for our own well-being. I think mental well-being.
I think if we realize that we've gotten really good at podcasting in the like technical sense, that's gonna be a dark day.
It's care. It's self-care.
It is self-care being bad at podcasting.
Yeah, the only thing worse than being a podcaster.
It's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear.
Business.
I don't
What else has
know.
happened? What else has happened?
My cabbage seedlings, as you know, are slowly dying, which isn't
Yeah.
good. So I think I'm just gonna say fucking just put them outside
Yeah.
under some plastic. We'll see.
Yeah, we haven't discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe look it up.
Lock it up.
Look
Oh,
it
look
up.
at I did look
Maybe
it up.
do some research.
And they were like, maybe nematodes are in your soil, and I was like, I don't know what to do about that. I have no idea what to do about that.
Not sure how I feel about there being nematodes in my house, let alone in my soil.
Exactly. I sleep next to these plants.
He does. It's very sweet.
It is quite sweet. Yes. Yeah, I don't know. Cabbage leeks are doing really well. Actually, I just sowed some more leeks, and they're going nuts.
Your leeks are looking very strong.
Yes.
Yours are well advanced.
Yeah.
Considerably more advanced than ours in their growth. But ours are outside for the most part. So.
They've been studying. Oh, sure. Yeah, there you go.
I've had some tomato seeds that I'd sown weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and they finally made an appearance.
Oh, did they?
This week, so,
Congratulations. I was just thinking about that because I've been thinking I should maybe do the tomato thing. But nice. Well done. Well done.
So, yeah.
You know what I hate, Dan?
What do you think, Jack?
I hate when you, as you do, go onto
Cabbages.
the YouTube and type in no dig, how to grow this, how to grow that, advice on growing like leeks. And then like you click on one of the videos and it's like, first step, order some leek plants. It's like, okay. It's like, wow, okay, I could have told you that.
Yeah. How do I grow this? Source some seeds.
Yeah, buy the plant and then harvest it. It's like, all right.
First thing, decide you want to grow.
I saw a how to grow cabbage video by a channel that I really, really like, which is kind of like an older, I'm not going to say evangelist couple in Florida, but they're maybe fundamentalists. They got something going on. But the guy was like, be sure and put a fish beneath all of your cabbage plants. And I was like,
This is a Jesus thing.
maybe. Is this a Jesus thing? Maybe. I don't know. I've heard of people putting fish under plants, but I thought that was like the diggers might have done that. I don't know if we still do that. If we still put fish under plants, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyway, if you have a spare
We'll
fish,
test it out.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
How to make leeks not vegetarian. Kill fish to grow this plant. Such is life. Such is life. Well, all around, great week for humanity.
Yeah.
We're getting better.
The U.S. involvement in the war in Afghanistan is finally ending.
We finally did it, Dan. We're finally leaving. No one's ever heard this before, and we're not going to have any military presence there, or any kind of military bases, or any kind of intelligence bases. We're just done. I'm stunned.
Yeah.
Wow. And we won, too, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, didn't declare victory, did they? So that would have been...
Why not? Honestly,
Yeah,
if you're Joe Biden, why not? Just say we won and leave. God, jeez, that's what I would do. I'd be like, oh my God, we did it. We've sold all of the heroin we need to sell in Afghanistan, and now we have won. So go America. Well, the world crawls on. Enough about the present, Dan. My God. I don't know how this one's gonna go.
Yeah, we did something a little different this
did.
week.
I'm a little hot coming into this one, I'll be honest.
Why don't you tell us what's different about this episode?
Well, Dan, what's different about this episode is that we did not read anything, which was
A relief, a blessing.
a blessing, and instead we watched something. Now, what that means is that we watched a moving picture.
TikTok.
A TikTok. Yeah, we were watching like QAnon conspiracy theorist TikToks. No, we decided to watch because we're planning something huge next week. Don't tell anybody we're not. We decided to watch Errol Morris's Fog of War. Because every left podcast is talking about what's his name, Adam Curtis's new movie, we figured we wouldn't. So just watch something else.
Not his new one, nor any of his
Nor
other ones.
his other ones.
I
yeah.
don't think I've ever watched an entire episode of an Added Curtis documentary. So
I like him, honestly. I think a lot of lefties are like, oh, he's not out here calling for out and out communism, and it's like, do you know anybody who's doing that? Like, I don't know. I think they're pretty disturbing, but they're pretty good.
Do you want to tell us anything about Errol Morris, or do you want to?
I mean, Errol Morris, he's an interesting guy. He really makes pretty kooky movies. This one is, I would say, one of his not kooky movies. It's pretty kind of. It's funny, right? Because this movie kind of presents itself as like a normal documentary that you might even see on like the History Channel about. So we should tell everybody it's about Robert McNamara, and it's about his involvement with war, basically. A very kind of specific couple decades of his life from World War II, basically, until the end of Vietnam.
You almost get the impression Morris may have wanted to interview him about Vietnam, and then he couldn't help but just bring up any aspect of his life that preceded that.
Yeah. Like at one point he was like, so we're going to need to talk about Vietnam. And he's like, well, let me tell you about the end of the war. And it's like, wait, which war? And he's like, World War I. It's like, okay.
It was 1918.
Yeah. Which, okay, let's call him on the first bit of bullshit.
Given that he was born in 1960.
Yeah. He was like, my first memory is Armistice
People
Day.
celebrating on the top of trolley cars. And
He's like, you might think that was a joke. It's like, I don't believe you for a second that you remember that thing when you were 2 years old.
Yeah, I think he said, you might not believe me. And we were like, yes, we do not believe you, Robert McNamara.
Exactly. But yeah, so I mean, this movie, it does present itself as a very normal documentary, but it's funny because it does something that's a little weird, I guess, which is that it just kind of lets McNamara talk. And I mean, you definitely don't leave this with a good feeling about McNamara or about many things at all. But it's funny because it's like, it's pretty much entirely his words, right? I mean, it's almost entirely just him justifying what he's done. And you kind of being disgusted with his justifications and his actions. Is that fair?
I don't know whether I came away disgusted necessarily. I think going into this, what limited information I had about Robert McNamara was kind of almost sympathetic. I think mostly because sort of in comparison to people that would come on to sort of prosecute the war in Vietnam.
Sure.
Like, at least he seemed to be somebody, in my limited understanding that I sort of come across, at least he seemed to be somebody who wasn't approaching it in a purely ideologically driven way. Now, it was an operative of ideology, for sure.
Yeah.
Not that he would necessarily think of himself as that. But my understanding, and you got this a little bit from the description of events kind of thing. It's quite easy to look at Robert McNamara's involvement with these events and knowing that he was sort of like skeptical toward the worthwhileness of being in this war, and sort of pushing in one way or other for at least sort of limited engagement or gradual withdrawal or what have you. And then you come across the idea that like there were moves being made to end this war in the mid-60s.
Sure.
And you can very easily, you can sort of cast him as somebody who, or maybe even the entire sort of like, at least the Kennedy administration and the Johnson administration to some extent as well, sort of like had things foisted upon them by events in some ways. But I don't know whether, having watched this movie, it's necessarily, certainly hasn't reinforced that idea.
Yeah, fair. Well, he's just a sympathetic little guy.
Yeah, but it has like he is clearly still trying to cast him. He was trying to cast himself as something of a public servant, I think, and he really wants to divest himself of, I suppose, blame. And yeah, as you're saying, like what's interesting about it is he kind of digs his own holes for himself. But also it feels very much like what he's doing is rattling off very well practiced lines.
Sure.
He could almost be reading from an autobiography that he either hasn't written or has written, but like, I don't know. It's all very well rehearsed, I suppose, or practiced.
Well, I wonder, rehearsed in his own mind over the last 5 decades?
Yes. Particularly as it ends with this sense that maybe we should just jump straight to the ending. But it does give you the sense of him being, if not like racked with or feeling guilt, like knowing that he has to not ask himself certain questions.
Sure.
To sort of like stave that off, or at least he has to continue to perpetuate certain rationalizations to sort of save himself to some extent or protect his sense of himself.
Yeah. Let me make a counterpoint, which is that I came away with this thinking, wow, this is maybe one of the the ratio of stupidest person to social level on the like social ladder that they've climbed is like way out of proportion. And I don't mean this as stupid. Obviously he's a numbers guy, right? And that's his whole thing. And Errol Morris,
stats guy.
Exactly. The Errol Morris definitely makes like he hits you over the head with that, with like the like intercut. You know,
I mean,
like
I almost think like,
numbers.
from what I know about the war in Vietnam and his attempts to sort of like transpose events into statistics, like a lot of that was missed out of this documentary. Like, his entire engagement with the war in Vietnam was basically present this in statistics form. Kind of thing.
Well, even with the bombing, and I mean, let me just say what I mean by stupidest person.
Yeah.
It's like,
because I think we do need to linger for a little while on the character of Robert McNamara, how he presents himself, how he comes across, because there were some weird peculiarities that I can't sort of like reconcile in my head.
Well, I just mean like here's someone who was defense secretary, right? And before that, he was president of Ford for a couple of weeks, which I kind of find very funny. And then before that, he was, I guess, just like I don't know exactly what his title was in the Air Force, but he was like the guy crunching the numbers for the Air Force, saying like, what city should we obliterate in Japan next, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that was almost the most... I mean, maybe it's because it lingered on it for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And it lingered on a very specific event, or a very specific series of events that he was complicit in World War II.
Sure.
That was almost the more troubling...
Oh, well, sure. I mean, infinitely more people died based on that. But I mean, like, here's a guy who... if you were someone who was looking for the American dream, he didn't start from nothing. He kind of tried to make it like you seem like he started from nothing. He's like, I was too poor to attend Harvard, so I went to Berkeley. It's like, yeah, all right. But like, here's someone who was able to pretty much work his way up through the ranks in some sense. Like, obviously, it's not all like, wow, this kid's got gumption. He was a numbers guy in a time where they needed numbers guys, right? But like, while he was really good at that, I don't think he really had any kind of political sense in the vein of like, well, what am I being used for? Because I think throughout the entire movie, we see that he's just being used by other people. And it doesn't really get into this too much in the movie. Maybe we'll talk about it next week if we talk about the book. But like, for example, when he is in World War II, in his time in World War II, he shrugs off the atrocities that he helped commit by basically being like, well, LeMay said this, LeMay said that. Curtis LeMay was one of the biggest villains of the 20th century, right? And then when it's like, we get this idea of him going to Ford and being made president as like, he did it through his own gumption. It's like, no, well, the like other guy who made him president was kind of just using him because they like there was a failing company and they needed to like have a stats guy come in and a new fresh face. And then obviously in Vietnam, it's like, he thinks that he's saving American lives and like promoting freedom and justice around the world by like crunching these numbers and using statistics in the mind. And it's like, he still thinks the Gulf of Tonkin was like when this movie was made, when he was an old man, he still thinks that the Gulf of Tonkin was like, this damn North Vietnamese blowing up one of our ships. He like still totally believed in so much of this crap about like Americans spreading freedom. And it was very clear, even from like a cursory understanding of the history surrounding that time period, that like here was someone who we might like to think was like in control of all of their facilities, but was like kind of just being used completely by like other people for various means. Like, and he just doesn't see that at all. And it's so funny because like to take that to another extent, it's like whenever Errol asks him to justify what he's been part of, he just shrugs off on other people to the point where Errol goes, okay, like, how do you feel about what you did in Vietnam? Whose responsibility is that? And he goes, no, it's the president's. It's just like, what if you were just spent this whole time talking about this was all your idea? Oh, did you authorize the use of Agent Orange? I don't know. Maybe. I authorized a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that
Who
was
cares?
one of the worst bits. It was like, yeah, like Agent Orange was used, and it turned out it was a horrible like chemical weapon, and it killed loads of people. And yeah, like it was used, and it was terrible because he's very keen to like his whole shtick is like, I'm looking back on history with a hindsight that I couldn't have at the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of like absolved to some extent by the fact that I now know I'm sort of saintly because I am able to reckon with these things. I'm not
That's what
I'm
makes
not
me
so
sick.
desperate to hide behind.
Yeah.
I'm not, but at the same time, like he's also willing to sort of like say lines like the one you just referenced, where he's like, Did I actually? I'm not sure whether I actually authorized. I'm not sure I was the one that authorized the use of Agent Orange. Me, Robert McNamara, U.S. Defense Secretary.
Before we go any further, we stand, Dan, in complete solidarity with the nice young Quaker boy who set himself on fire underneath Robert McNamara's office. We've said before this is a pro-Quaker podcast. That was pretty baller.
Yeah.
Maybe not baller that he was almost killed his daughter, but like baller in the sense of like, damn.
Yeah, what was his name? Howard something?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I do like how he compared himself to the
Yeah,
Quaker.
that was the thing. Yeah, I was a bit taken aback. I was like, are you Robert McNamara like comparing yourself to the guy who self-immolated in protest outside of your office in 1964 or 65?
How have we created a world where someone like that is able to become defense secretary? It's very obvious because he's just a technocrat who crunches numbers. But it's like, this guy had no idea what he was doing. Mm-hmm. It was like, you confront him with a bit of paper that's like, we destroyed Tokyo today. It's like, however many thousands of years old city, however many like millions of people we killed because of these bombings, that you were able to be like, well, how can we kill more people better? How can we do it better without losing our wingman? Something like that. It's like he just it's something beyond simple, like he's just breaking his brain to not think about what he did. Mm-hmm. It's like he has always believed, and it's just a product of something. It's a product of something in society where he just goes, yeah, well, I mean, we would have been war criminals had we lost, but we didn't. I'm Robert McNamara, baby. Let's talk about Ford. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm coming in a little hot. I still don't know if I figured out what it is that was able to make him so psychopathic. Because there's people like Curtis LeMay who knew exactly what they were doing and who had seen war and who had gone, fuck it, that's just what we're going to do. That's what we got to do to win this war. We have to, let's destroy Cuba. Let's destroy China. Let's destroy the USSR. But like, he isn't even at that level. And it's almost like when you're confronted with LeMay versus McNamara, you're almost a little, not sympathetic, but you're almost more sympathetic to LeMay because he knew exactly what he was doing. McNamara was just like, look at me. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it was LeMay, I think, and it was McNamara was quoting LeMay as saying that if we lose this, we'll be war criminals kind of thing. Like, at least he was willing to reconcile with what he was doing. It was a weird thing that I noticed was there are two occasions when McNamara in the movie, except for the end, there are two occasions when he actually seemed almost. There's one occasion when he's clearly brought to tears when he's talking about Kennedy's death, and the other time when he seems to be almost brought to tears is when he's describing LeMay talking about the sort of aftermath of the leveling of Tokyo with firebombs kind of thing. It's almost as if he can only engage with, this is like really like amateur psychology now. Almost like he can only engage with those feelings of remorse when he's engaging with somebody else's
through
sort
LeMay's
of
eyes.
sort of actually demonstrating what it is kind of thing.
He's directly confronted about like, what do you think about what you did to Japan? And he goes, well, Curtis LeMay would have said this. And it's like, well, what would you have said? It's like he's too stupid to say something. It's like he's not psychopathic enough to be Curtis LeMay. That's why I just think he's like, he was just kind of stupid. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, my sense of every time I look at him, well, one thing, like, I hadn't really thought about this idea of him being used by all these people throughout sort of the narrative arc of this movie, which and his sort of political career and also his professional career, I suppose. And I think you've convinced me that's sort of the correct way to look at it. But also, there was just this sense, when I look at him, there's this double sense. I've never seen somebody both look totally out of place and also seemed to feel totally at ease.
That's a really good point.
It's very peculiar to watch him because he's walking in these halls of power, or he's about to give a press conference, and he somehow manages to do both being bumbling and a bit of an idiot, and also genuinely ease with the situation.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to it's not, you like to use a sort of contemporary piece of slang, like. It's not cringe, right? You don't feel some sense of like, oh, Robert McNamara, what a strange person you are. But you kind of want to, because he is clearly inherently a bit weird kind of thing. And maybe it stems from what you're describing of this kind of like person who is so sort of detached from. It might well be that he was sort of psychologically detached from the human experience of being in these positions. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
Or what experience it was that he was having.
Yeah. Well, and how crazy was it when he was he was confronted about like, well, okay, those 2 supposed attacks that really like ramped up American involvement in Vietnam.
Yeah, no, I didn't really understand the course of events, so maybe
we'll talk about it next week.
Okay.
But suffice it to say, the Gulf of Tonkin attacks basically been proven to have been
there were two supposed torpedo attacks
on patrol boats that were just hanging out in Vietnam.
Yeah. International waters, Jack. Don't forget that.
Yeah, exactly. But when he's confronted about that, about like, well, this is the thing that started the Vietnam War, which started like, quite a bit of human suffering.
Yeah.
Like, he really drops like, and this is another thing that just made me go, this guy's just an idiot. Like, how can you can be mad at him, but it's like, the guy's just kind of stupid. Is he at one point just goes, well, we had, it later kind of came out that there was some American involvement with assassinating these 2 leaders in the coup, and then with Gulf of Tonkin. And it's like, he just moves on, and it's like, you're talking about treason is what you're talking about. Like, hey, obviously, I got no love for a nation state. No, I don't really care about treason. But it's like, if he has any of the values that he says he has, which I honestly believe that he does, like, what he's talking about is like, you must have known who these people were because of the like turmoil going on in Kennedy's inner circles. It's like, you knew who these people were who set this up. And he just goes, yeah, whatever, but I was just the numbers guy. It's like,
yeah,
what?
I probably ought to make a correction of what I said earlier in preparation for next week's episode. Earlier, I suggested that the Kennedy administration and McNamara were fortune to events kind of thing. They kind of wanted to get out of Vietnam, but just things kept happening that kept drawing back in. There is more of a story behind these things.
Very intentional. Very intentional. How that just happens in these countries that almost go communist. Yeah. I don't know. It's absolutely baffling. The guy is like, he's bought the American dream to the extent that he just believes that he just has to do his job, kind of without questioning it. And it's weird because it's almost not even a question of him questioning the evil things that he's done. It's just him going, like, well, that's just the way things work. There are going to be conservative elements that, assassinate a couple people to continue an American war of imperialism. And it's just, I'm just the numbers guy. And it's like, what's crazy is McNamara was considered like one of the more liberal progressive. Mm-hmm. He was considered like progressive in Kennedy's administration because he was the like, not LeMay, let's just bomb everything. He's like, well, if we bombed everything, what would that accomplish? How many dead people versus how many dead people on our side? And like, that was people were like, wow.
His great virtue seems to be that he was willing to weigh the pros and cons of killing like vast hundreds of thousands of people.
What was it?
It wasn't like an ideological desire.
Yeah.
It wasn't predicated out of racism. It was just predicated out of like stats. Right?
Stats, which made no sense when LeMay stood up after they had like firebombed Tokyo, and there's the really sad American Air Force guy who was like, I want to know who it was that told us to fly at low altitudes because my gunner was shot and died. And LeMay's like, God damn it, we killed 100,000 Japanese tonight. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like pros and cons. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I get so flustered even thinking about these people.
So I can't recall. Presumably, even if it was McNamara who suggested using a different type of ordnance in bombing Tokyo, he didn't admit to it. What was it about his statistical analysis
I think it was that the bombs were less when they had to be dropped from a higher altitude.
Yeah, they've got these
they were less
high
accurate.
altitude bombers.
Yeah.
So they were avoiding mass casualties of their own planes.
Yeah.
Or their own pilots, I suppose. But the bombs weren't being as effective.
Yeah.
So maybe it was just his stats that proved that of the ineffectiveness of these bombing runs.
Well, I think it's like you don't want to. How can we make these bombing runs more effective? You don't want to just drop bigger bombs because like it could still be inaccurate. You need bombs with like a bigger surface area of destruction. Oh, the city's made of wood. Let's just burn the entire thing down. He's so progressive.
It's just a solution to a problem. He's just presented with a problem and it solves the solution.
God. And how disturbing is it whenever you're reminded about just how many bombs were dropped on Southeast Asia during the quote-unquote Vietnam War. And, he casually just dropped, we dropped 3 times as many bombs in Southeast Asia as we did in all of Europe.
Western Europe and,
in World War II. It's just like, God.
And then they decided because they were worried about the security of the planes, they were probably going to have to put boots on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can't have more planes being destroyed. It's very interesting. I wonder to what extent he's a product of like corporate culture, because he very much, he wasn't like a bullish, like, let's go kick some ass Wall Street executive, owns a hedge fund kind of guy. He was just very much a like, what about if we put seatbelts in cars? And they're like, you're a genius. We'll make you the president of the company.
I almost feel like that basically sums up this entire movie and his entire life. So after the end of his involvement in World War II, because World War II came to an end, and then he and his wife both caught polio at the same time. Maybe we shouldn't have recorded you sort of smirking.
He was almost proud of that. It was weird. He's like, how many husband and wives do you know?
Yeah. It's so statistically improbable
that my God.
That a husband and wife would catch polio at exactly the same time. He was always pleased to have been part of the minority statistic.
I mean, isn't polio... I don't know. Never mind.
And then he's like... his line on it is like, all I wanted to do was go back to teaching at Harvard, and I was going to spend my life. I just wanted to go and be a nobody professor at Harvard, and then events just pulled me back into the fray. Kind of thing. So the way it's sort of told is that he was convinced by some friend of his that the friend was putting together a group of people who were all going to go and work for Ford Motor Company because they had like that nobody working there was college educated, which seems to was intended to imply that they weren't capable of doing the kinds of statistical analysis that McNamara would have been and his collaborators were. And also, like, apparently Ford was going under at this point.
Yeah, classic.
And so he goes to Ford. And so he's doing sort of statistical analysis, like, get me some stats. Why is everybody buying why are people buying Volkswagens and not Fords, kind of thing? Or why
Volkswagens, World War II had just ended. Presumably those cars were still being made by Nazis. That's insane.
And and then sort of all this, like, get me some information on all these accidents. Why are all these accidents? And he was like, so it's either user error or it's technical fault kind of thing. And it was at this point he had the saintly idea that maybe they ought to do is make driving a car safer, make the car more protective of the people who are driving it. And so they go to all these lengths, this sort of like peculiar idea that what they were doing to gather more data gathering, what he was doing was dropping human skulls down a banister, off a large stairwell, like wrapped in different types of protective material to sort of like to work out what the best way is to package a human being.
And he got paid $800,000 for that.
But the point that I wanted to get to was like he was basically like, so basically all of this information led them to innovate the idea that we ought to put seatbelts in all of these cars. And then the final line on this whole discussion was, but it turned out nobody wanted to use seatbelts, and then they kind of move on to Vietnam. It's like almost the best metaphor for Robert McNamara's life in that, like, he had the great statistical breakthrough and nobody wanted to follow him along with it. Kind of thing.
Yeah. So he's just like, fuck it, I don't care. That's again.
The numbers are right, so I'm quite happy with you.
It's just another reason I think this guy just wasn't very bright. Is because it's like that was his idea, and he just didn't care about following it through. It was just 50,000 people, or however many people die a year in a car crash. You know, if I put my foot down and whatever, I don't care. It's like I could do anything. I'm the president of the company.
I found a solution to the problem.
Yeah.
So like we don't have to. It's not. I'm not interested in actually getting people to take up the solution to the problem. Just so long as I know what the solution is. It's not,
Yeah. Jeez.
And it's the same with. I don't actually need to convince LeMay or Kennedy or Johnson or whatever. Like all I need to do is sort of present the ideas.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, right? Because like, as materialists, I think we do kind of like obviously to kind of like take the people out of it to a certain extent, you know what I mean? And be like, well, after the end of World War II, a confrontation with quote unquote communism might have been inevitable because of America's like imperialist aims and blah, 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 blah. But like in this movie, it's a little spooky because you do kind of see like, oh, wow, Curtis LeMay really caused quite a bit of trouble and quite a bit of suffering just by being a human, like an actor in history, you know what I mean? And like Kennedy to a certain extent, yeah, obviously did too and stuff, but it's like,
yeah, LeMay was presented as being really disappointed with the conclusion to the Cuban Missile Crisis. They really wanted an excuse to bomb the hell out of Cuba.
To destroy Cuba. Yeah. I like that. I like because at one point he says, there are a lot of big people in America calling for an invasion of Cuba. It's like, okay, you mean the mafia is what you mean, and the CIA specifically. So like, I love the idea of them being like, we need to retake Cuba, and the American government solution is to destroy it. And all of the mobsters are like, I guess we can't put casinos there anymore. It's like, well, win, lose. Someone's got to lose. At least they got rid of Castro. But yeah, I mean, again, just to, geez. And Oswald, whoa, who said that? And Jack Ruby, for that matter. We'll save that for a later episode. But my point about all of that is like, the movie, I think it's the beginning, I think it's like framed with those little plaques, right, that Kennedy gave everybody. That's like silver engraved plaques of the month of October in 1962, 63? 62, yeah, because Kennedy would die in November 63, I believe. So the point of
61.
Maybe 61. In the 60s, we should say.
You look it up, guys.
I'll
like,
edit.
Google the Cuban Missile Crisis. You'll find out.
Google Cuban Missile Crisis. And then Charles Dowding, and then Murray Bookchin. But like, so Kennedy gave all of these plaques to people to basically be like, we came pretty close to nuclear war in this week. I also like how when McNamara is explaining it, he's like, these were the several days that we came closest to nuclear war. It was October 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd. And he just goes on and on. It's like,
23rd.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, whoa, okay. But again, that's a moment that I think like certainly deserves study for like a materialist point of view, because it was like, well, to what extent did Khrushchev and Kennedy specifically play a part in the absolute changing of history, right? And it's one that's always pointed to kind of a lot by the right wing, quite frankly. But maybe meaningfully so, because by all accounts on either side, like Kennedy was like, okay, a lot of people were telling him to just destroy Cuba and start a nuclear war, but I don't want to give Kennedy too much credit, but like to a certain extent, he did say, that doesn't seem like a good idea, And I don't know, you do wonder, and this is disturbing, I think, as like perhaps materialist, that it could have gone another way. It freaks me out. I don't know what that's.
I feel like people are put in the positions they're put in by history, kind of thing, but they still have the opportunities to be those people, kind of thing. And it does. You do get the impression that both, Khrushchev and Kennedy were instrumental in sort of cooling this situation a little bit. It was funny how McNamara is just like, and we got through it purely by luck.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh.
It's just chance. We came this close to nuclear apocalypse. It was just chance that we got away with it.
Now let me tell you about seatbelts. It's like, oh God. I felt nauseous watching that.
Yeah, one of the adages is like, people are rational, but they don't always. That rationality doesn't always result in rational outcomes. And then in the next section, he's talking about how he met Castro, and he reckons that Castro was totally up for like all out nuclear apocalypse.
Castro's like, let's do it, baby.
Yeah. Whether that sort of story is true or not, you don't necessarily get the impression that most of the heads that were operating at the time were rational.
Yeah, no
minds.
kidding. How great was the moment when he says something about, like, Castro is very belligerent, and Errol Morris stops him for a second and was like, because we invaded Cuba. And he's like, well,
there was a bit of pigs, but like...
yeah, Bay of Pigs, Alpha 66, all of that. Moving on. My goodness.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, I was nothing to do with that, so I really can't possibly have been significant, right?
yeah, exactly. What does this have to do with numbers? Come on. I think the most important thing that we need to talk about, Dan, when we talk about this movie, is Robert McNamara's hair. We have to talk about what was going on with her, because I think that was mainly the star of the movie. Is that we see him when he was very young. That was my primary
distraction.
It was very odd, and then when you brought up his very strange hair part, and then as we get into Vietnam,
it's.
And then black cat.
Crosses our path.
Is that good luck? Oh god. And then we get into Vietnam and his hair's looking a little bit worse. Then we get to after Vietnam and it's looking bad. And then you realize he's never changed his hairstyle to the point of when he's being
every
interviewed in
schoolbook photo that he's got from the 30s or whatever.
But then in 2003, he's tried to keep his hair and he just has these disgusting little patches of dude, just come on, you got to shave at least the top of your head.
So what this tells us is the most important thing we've learned about Robert McNamara from watching this movie is he had the most amazing comb over you have ever seen.
Yeah, I guess.
He was making the smallest amount of hair really work very, very well.
Yeah.
Or the sort of hair follicles that he had along his fringe and sort of I don't know what that part of the sideburns, I suppose, whatever. We're really working, carrying the lion's share of the work in covering the rest of his very bald scalp.
Very true. Yeah. Poor guy.
No, good on it. Well done.
Sure.
Well done, Robert McNamara. Making great use of a comb and bro cream.
A lot of cream. One thing that also I found disturbing about this movie, I would say, was the language that, first of all, LBJ does not come across very well in this movie at all. He just comes across as just a cretin, just an absolute cretin. But the language specifically that he was using when he was presumably just drunk at a press conference was obviously, this isn't a hot take, but very similar to the language used in the War on Terror. But to the point where it was obviously Texan, sounded so much like Bush's accent. It was very hit times a flat circle, isn't it? It's just oh god.
Yeah, and America never loses wars.
Exactly. God. Did McNamara have any comment on that, on whether or not we lost or not? I forget.
I don't think it was asked of him.
Yeah. I'd like to know what he thought. I don't think it would even be a question.
What he was proud of was by the time he left office, less than 50% of the overall casualties that happened in the Vietnam War had happened by the time he left, meaning more that were responsible for. His predecessors were responsible for more than he was.
He was happy that he did not get charged as a war criminal.
I would assume so.
Yeah. I like how at the end, too, it was just a footnote. This is the time in his life I'd really like to know about, when it was and anyway, after this, he served as the president of the World Bank for several decades. It was what was he up to there? I would like to know all about that.
I don't know whether he was up to anything. He was probably enabling a whole lot of nefarious stuff just by ignorance.
Just hanging out with Milton Friedman, just vibing.
Yes.
There was a line right at the end, right after that, where it was he served as president of the World Bank, and then it was and he's been fighting for the cause of poverty and injustice around the world. It's was that sarcasm? It's it definitely came across as sarcasm. It was very, or if McNamara saw the first cut and was God damn it, put something in here about me fighting injustice. I found it very odd.
Yeah. Should we talk about the ending a little bit? Just because there's a sort of epilogue period at the end where I suppose Morris is trying to press him on certain things to get him to actually reflect. It's peculiar because throughout the interview he's ostensibly reflecting on his history, but there are certain vantage points or ways of looking at it he's just unwilling to go down. Yeah. He just knows he's going to get into so much trouble. He knows there's no way to spin it. And the whole sort of facade of Robert McNamara seems to sort of spin apart at the end, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's clever construction of a documentary more than it is a great sort of like unpicking of a human being by an interviewer.
Yeah.
But it's quite a nice sort of arc of the document, the interview. I felt, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very strange because it's like, yeah, at the end he's basically bluntly asked, "What responsibility do you hold? How do you feel about what was done under your watch?" That poor Quaker, and he doesn't want to answer it at all, and it's like. I was like bummed that that's how the movie ended because I was like, oh, I would have liked him to say a little bit more, and it just ends on this kind of flat note. But then you just kind of go, oh, well, what else would you expect him to say? There's no way he was going to take any kind of responsibility. That just isn't who he is. And so for him to basically just be like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to talk about that.
I'm not going to answer these questions.
Yeah, and he's like,
I'm not going to come at it from this angle, kind of thing.
Well,
Just going to get me into more trouble than it's worth.
I mean, he gets it exactly because it's like anything he said, because he's a war criminal, would be like. Either justifying or being like, oh, poor me. And it's like, he's smart enough at least to realize that anything he says, including not saying anything, comes across very poorly.
Yeah.
What's our take on McNamara in terms of obviously not good guy, but like responsibilities? Where do we weigh him up in terms of the atrocities that have been committed in the name of the United States under his, I don't want to say reign, but like tenure as technocrat? Where do you kind of fall?
I mean, I suppose my initial sympathies after having had this discussion and sort of having reconsidered him to have been somebody who was largely manipulated by all people that he came across, he just seems like the ultimate cover for duplicity in others. And I suppose that's why he wants to blame everybody else at the end. I mean, maybe he's fully aware that that's the relationship he has with LBJ or whoever, like it's all somebody else's fault. But I wonder at the time, like the job of sort of like turning what was, I mean, all wars are brutal, but was an incredibly brutal war, into breaking it down into a sort of stats game such that you can divest it of some of that kind of like visceral feeling, I suppose.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to get some sense of what role his sort of like removed bureaucratic style actually, in what way that facilitated actually continuing to sell this war to an American populace that might have otherwise been opposed to it, kind of thing. In what way? What did he function as a cover for like other people's
That's a great
evil?
point.
I suppose.
Yeah.
So that might be his like primary role in history, I think, because there's kind of like
I hadn't thought of that
as the kind of like friendly face cover, I suppose. For
I mean, it's almost not even friendly though. He is the perfect cover for American just shittiness. It's like, oh, well, we couldn't have gone to Vietnam because a couple of Wall Street lawyers staged this clearly fake incident in the Gulf of Tonkin. It couldn't have been for private gains. It couldn't have been for greed.
It was the North Vietnamese just mistook us for another imperial power like the French, which was definitely not our intention and our
And it's funny because at the end he talks about meeting, I forget exactly who it was, but he talks about meeting like a leader of the North Vietnamese and having like dinner with them, right? And the guy was basically like, fuck you, McNamara. And you can tell McNamara is completely sincere when he's like, we were trying to help you. He really thinks that they were trying to help him.
But not only that, like he wanted to go into this interview, not this interview, he wanted to meet this representative of the North Vietnamese in an effort to ascertain whether there was an alternate course of events where fewer people could have been killed and we could have resulted in a different situation, kind of thing. And I think he kind of expects to find in what I suppose he thinks of as his counterpart on the other side, somebody he was making similarly like almost non-anti or non-humanist considerations, kind of thing. Quite, yeah. He was expecting to encounter just like his chess opponent,
the North Vietnamese Robert McNamara.
Yeah. Because clearly for him it was just this kind of like moving pieces around the board kind of thing. Whereas, I mean, I would imagine there were many on the North Vietnamese side who had a similar mentality, but like so many vast numbers of sort of people died. That it's hard not to sort of it's not hard not to sympathise with that representative of the North Vietnamese who goes into this thing and wants to just tell McNamara to fuck off. Right?
Yeah.
It's just like, no, you invaded us. We wanted our freedom. You invaded us. It was so clear that we weren't stooges for the Chinese, because we're always fighting. We've always been at war with the Chinese. It's so clear that we're not stooges of the Soviet Union, but you had to bring us into this sort of like imagined global chessboard of anti-communist actions that you were taking all over the world. Because that's clearly McNamara's view on it, right? One of the sort of like conceptual framings that he puts over his whole sort of description of events is that it was the Cold War, and this is what was happening. We were just sort of playing out the sort of like the inevitable toing and froing of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And the North Vietnamese, and sort of personified in this one person whose name we can't recall, the North Vietnamese clearly represented, unfortunately found themselves as a vital tile on that chessboard.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head completely. I think he's an excellent face for America to blame all of its disasters on the technocrat. It can't be anybody else. It can't be imperialism. It can't be greed. It can't be capitalism. Of course, it's not capitalism. It's the technocrats. And
maybe it's not even the technocrat. Maybe it's just the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Really good point. And to a certain extent, it's frustrating because it's like, well, this isn't who that movie should have been made about. This movie about these eras should have been made about the Dulleses, should have been made about all of these other people who were like really controlling American foreign policy for long. But it's like, wow, I mean, first of all these people were dead by then. McNamara was like one of the only ones still alive. But it's like, what an interesting take on this whole era to interview him. Someone who like we really want to think of as like this arch villain, but is just like kind of like an idiot, but a very smart like numbers guy. It's just the numbers, and that's what he thinks, which is mind-boggling. It's like it's the numbers. Damn it, it's the goddamn numbers, and it's like, yeah, it's crazy. Doesn't leave you with a good taste about the United States. I'll say that right now.
No. And imagine more unpalatable, immensely more unpalatable morsels are to come.
yeah, absolutely. Secretary of Defense, not
Robert S. McNamara.
Robert S. McNamara. Strange McNamara. That was very odd. His name is Strange.
His middle name is Strange.
There is a baseball player who's changed his name to honor his mother who recently passed away. One of the coolest baseball players of recent time. His name was D. Gordon. He changed his name to D. Strange because his mother's maiden name was Strange, I believe. So it is a name.
It is a name.
It is a name. Yeah. Very odd. I don't know what else there is to say about McNamara other than kind of what we said. He's very interesting to study. He's a very interesting person to study to understand 1939 America, maybe New Deal America through like the unraveling of the New Deal, because he's very much like someone that we'd like to blame, someone we would like to light ourselves on fire underneath his office. But it's like, yeah, man, stooge, idiot. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I just feel like he is a whole collection of ideologies personified. Yeah. Like he's largely he's like the liberal technocratic outlook on history or politics or events, kind of like personified in almost a true believer. Yeah. I mean, it sort of feels like what he wants to present is like, this is a history of genuine, rational, sensible people. Yeah. Just dealing with events.
Doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And never questioning it. Never questioning like anything. Yeah. Like nothing. To the point one of the more classic bits of the movie is when he's like, so I accepted the job as defense minister. Oh, my wife hated it. It gave her ulcers. It probably wound up killing her. It gave my kids ulcers. God damn it, it was the best years of my life. It's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute, buddy.
We never really got a good initially I thought what was being presented to us here was a person who had exceptional skills in certain areas who had been recognized by somebody, and he needed convincing that he had these skills and they ought to be put to this use.
Yeah.
But we never actually got a very good explanation as to why the Kennedys actually singled him out as being somebody worth bringing into the cabinet.
Yeah.
I mean, it may well be that they just look to leaders of business, and he was he was the most well-paid sort of president of any corporation.
I think it was like, let's get rid of the old school guys who do things on guts, and let's use hard science. I think that must have been it. And that was seen as progressive. Ugh. I would say perfect. If you ever want to explain to anyone what liberalism is, it is Robert McNamara. He is archetypical liberal. Never wants to question anything that's happened beyond the we did our best, damn it, and we tried to come to a mutual understanding, and we did our best to defend our values, and just absolute vague whims of being progressive, but is just an idiot. I keep saying it, but R.I.P.
Yeah.
He's our boy Bobby Strange. Yeah, that was fun. That was fun watching some. As I said, I'm still a little hot from it, but
yeah, I've learned a lot. It's changed my perspective on many things.
On many things.
Taught me some names to watch out for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll get there. Errol Morris has another movie that we talked about that maybe we'll watch eventually down the line to compare the two. But it's basically the same thing, but it's all about Rumsfeld. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Rumsfeld. We'll get there one day.
Yeah, Jack put these two options to me, and I was like, I'm not sure I could watch Donald Rumsfeld trying to justify. Maybe it's because Donald Rumsfeld's, in my mind anyway, and I think I'm correct in saying a totally different type of character.
I believe so.
But also just historically, I'm just so much more connected to Donald Rumsfeld and his sort of
pure evil. As I think that we can say that Robert McNamara might
it might be an interesting character study comparing the two.
Yeah.
If we do ever watch that second documentary.
Yeah.
Good
times, as opposed to back then, which were insane. We forget how insane those times were. From the beginning, where he's talking about how close they came to nuclear war, to oh my God, how great was it when they were talking about Vietnam protests? And he was like, tell you what, the Pentagon, pretty hard building to defend. Yeah. It's don't make it a Pentagon. It's
Yes, I gave the president assurances that no gun would be loaded without my strict...
Without me saying load them.
Yeah.
It's well, did you say load them? Oh, dear. Dear, oh, dear.
Nice.
Crazy times, man. Absolutely. That must have been just crazy. With the SDS going on, with Vietnam, with just coming out of, maybe nuclear war is going to destroy us all. Have you ever talked about anyone in your family about... what was it like over here, the Cuban Missile Crisis? Do you have any idea? Was it damn, it almost happened?
Yeah, I don't know how it was experienced, and I haven't ever spoken to anybody who... I haven't ever spoken to my dad about it. Would he remember? Yeah, I would have thought. Oh, no. I mean, he'd have been 8 or 9, which is old enough to remember, I suppose. But I suppose it would be old enough to take in the general tenor of the atmosphere.
The mood.
Yeah, the mood.
It was a bad mood. Vibes were bad in October of '61.
But yeah, it was was it in this? It was kind of there was some effort made to explain quite how present the threat felt to people, kind of thing.
I feel like everyone I've talked to was like, it wasn't gonna happen. I mean, to be fair, I didn't know anybody a lot. I don't know anybody who lived in Florida back then. They would have been like, we're all gonna die. But I feel like everybody I've talked to was like, it's not gonna happen. Come on. But maybe that's just naivety, because it certainly seems like it almost happened. I like how McNamara was like, we got a cable from Khrushchev, and he must have been drunk or something. I love just imagining Khrushchev just pounding some vodka and then being like, I gotta get in touch with Kennedy, dude. Doing lines of coke, get Kennedy on the phone.
Yeah, I don't know whether I interpreted it as being the person who was typing out the message was supposed to be drunk, but maybe they were all just maybe Khrushchev didn't like to drink alone. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was, but that drunk message was meant to be it's fine, just withdraw your blockade and we'll remove the warheads and everything will be fine. And then they got a cable later on the same day, which was clearly meant to be from all the hardliners being like, if you remove a single warhead from Cuba, if you set one foot on Cuban soil, it's like scorched earth and will destroy Western Europe or whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
Spanish anarchists are like, whoa, hey, come on now.
Yeah, I mean, I do want. I mean, you have got to wonder what would have happened if Richard Nixon had been elected in 1960.
I don't know if we'll have to wonder that for very long.
Yeah, maybe there isn't a lot of thinking to do.
Although
we know what would happen.
We know, yeah. Well, how about this? Let me phrase this question to you.
Robert
McNamara
seems like a fan of alternate histories. We could.
He does. He does. McNamara posited that the typical liberal, like, should we have these weapons of mass destruction that can be launched by a single person? Typical bullshit. That's like, why even ask that question?
Never before has somebody who has been so fundamental in the deaths of so many human beings said on so many occasions in an interview that human beings need to learn to stop killing one another.
I know. Maybe that's what made me nauseous.
Yeah.
That is just like, you idiot. Come
I
on.
mean, it seems like it's this kind of like a sort of human nature argument, like human beings have got to evolve beyond the stage they're at the moment. Until we successfully do that, somebody's just going to have to crunch the stats on how many people are dying.
But it's also like, he posits basically that, like, he implies that it's like, all it's going to take is one crazy person to get behind the wheel and it's all going to go to hell. It's like, well, we already had at least one insane person behind the wheel. Then it was Trump. And it was like, I don't know what that says necessarily. I get the feeling it was like nobody was about to like really take Trump seriously, like in his inner circle or whatever. But like, maybe it's a bigger problem.
Something I was wondering in this, and I was thinking about asking you whether you know, when it was that they started recording all of these, because a lot of the like lots of documentaries about this period of time and about these political figures, quite a lot of the material comes from these recorded phone calls that were done, or recordings that were taken in meetings or in the Oval Office or what have you. Do you know when they obviously these recordings were the undoing of Richard Nixon, right?
Yeah.
When did that? Do you know when that sort of practice started? And are they still doing it? And are one day we going to watch documentaries that are lots of recorded messages and discussions between Donald Trump and his advisors?
Mom was like, "Let me be clear." I would imagine that Kennedy was the first one to do it, but it might have been Eisenhower. No, I mean, well, it was either Eisenhower or Kennedy. But the first person to like put recording tapes in the Resolute desk, I think, was Nixon. But I mean, obviously Kennedy was recording people. I don't know if that was like with their knowledge or not. I don't know if those were phone calls or not. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not super sure.
I mean, maybe they were recording these phone calls for their own records kind of thing, and they've since entered the public domain, I suppose. Yeah.
To answer your other question, they're recording everything. They must be. Absolutely. And
I mean, at least the CIA are.
Somebody put in a FOIA request for like Donald Trump ordering his breakfast. That would be awesome.
How long do we get those tapes? Till do we get those tapes?
Release the tapes. I don't know. Robert McNamara, archetypical liberal. I don't know if I have much else to say about this fella. I would like to find a similar movie, but about who's the fat guy that we put on Death Watch? Not McNamara.
The guy whose belly is absorbing his face.
Yes, who's rotting before our eyes.
Kissinger. Henry Kissinger.
I'd like to know more about Kissinger, because whenever you read about any horrible event in that period, well, even longer than that period, obviously, but it's like, and these all of these events in Syria were preceded by, for some reason, Kissinger was there 2 weeks before. It's like, because he
marking
seems like,
targets.
Yeah, exactly. Brought his Sharpie. I mean, he seems like someone who's the opposite, from my limited knowledge of McNamara, of someone who's like
evil.
Ultimately evil, and just like, let's do this. It's evil. Who cares? I want to make money, or expand my influence.
Yeah.
Be interesting to compare him.
Yeah.
I mean,
at a certain point in history, American governments decided that they didn't need to keep around a Robert McNamara. They could just nobody cared.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Here starts our series in biographies of some of the most evil people of the 20th century.
Jeez. Which we might be talking about next week. Let's tease it. We might be talking about the book finally next week. We might be talking about the book. I don't know if any of you know what we're talking about, but we've been teasing this book for quite some time. It's very different to anything we've ever talked about before. It's one that I read maybe about a year ago now, when I went back home, and it blew my mind. I'll just say that. But it'll tie in with all this junk.
Yeah. It's since been in my possession for basically since we started recording this podcast, and I've made very limited progress with it. And Jack's finally twisted my arm and been like, not that I was reluctant necessarily. I'm quite excited to get into it. In fact, so it's going to be good. It's
Wait
going to
till
be
you
good.
get to the third part.
Yeah.
Well, let's not talk about the third part for now. That'll be. We're going to need to grow a couple extra eyes.
I wonder whether. I wonder whether we should bring up who was it? Was it? One portion of this documentary that we've yet to mention, and I can't really recall now what the circumstances of its coming up were discussions about the possibility of the Soviets testing nuclear bombs on the far side of the moon.
Oh my God. Yeah. Whoa. That was awesome. They were like, well, we know they're not testing nuclear bombs, so it's okay. And they're like, God damn it, they could do it on the far side of the moon.
It was, I mean, this doesn't really slot into our indictment of Robert McNamara necessarily. Sure. But the story was that McNamara, the US was so well ahead of the Soviet Union and its development of its nuclear capacities that Robert McNamara was willing to suggest that they could probably stop testing nuclear weapons. They had a pretty good grasp on how nuclear weapons worked.
Listen, we've killed enough Americans to know, you guys.
We've irradiated enough of Nevada. To which some hawks replied. I'd really like it to be this Air Force general whose name I've forgotten. Let's just pretend it was LeMay who suggested that we couldn't possibly trust the Soviets to also hold to a sort of like nuclear test ban treaty because they could. He suggests perfectly plausibly. Test their nuclear bombs on the far side of the moon. to which Robert McNamara says that's absurd.
Yeah.
So I think there's the one overlap between our opinion on events and Robert McNamara's. The possibility that the Soviets might have tested nuclear bombs on the far side of the moon was absurd in 1964.
To what purpose would they have done that?
To what end?
Yeah. They're like, what do you know?
To kill off the Nazis that are hiding there.
Oh my God. They left Argentina.
I've never seen that. What's it called? Iron Sky? I should watch that movie.
Iron Sky?
Oh, that's the sort of like B movie where the Nazis are living on the other side of the moon.
Oh.
But I don't know.
That sounds good.
Maybe we'll watch it.
Speaking of pop culture and stuff like that, one thing that really disturbed me throughout all of this is early on there's a lot of footage of like people loading bombs into planes and of tanks as far as the eye can see for World War I and then eventually for Vietnam. And I'd been all day at work listening to Warhammer 40K audiobooks on YouTube.
It's been a productive day.
It's been a productive day. I'm tapping away. I'm listening to audiobooks. Let me just say,
the manufactorums of the Imperium.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Would be proud of the.
Yeah.
Praise be to the Omnissiah.
Yeah, no kidding. It just made me feel like this World War II specifically was like. I mean, obviously that's where they got a lot of the like Kriegsmarine stuff like that. But like, oh man, it made me feel sick to be like, oh, this actually happened. Millions of people did die. Because I've been listening to like Exterminatus, like, whoa, imagine if this happened on Earth. It's like, oh, it kind of did.
And the billion-strong legions of the Imperium march to their death on a daily basis, and the sort of like unending, grinding, bitter war in the 41st millennium, where there is nothing but war.
Where there is nothing, there is only war. Imagine that world. Wow, that would be crazy if there was only war. That would be brutal.
We've never lived through that, have we?
Oh, jeez.
That's somber note.
That's somber note. Jeez.
We were trying to like get out of our kind of like
Malaise.
yeah.
With Soviets testing missiles on the far side of the moon.
Yeah. There is no escape.
That would be baller if they did do that. I
Yeah.
would say. I'd be like, all right, maybe we should have nuclear weapons if that's what they're going to do with them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We'd
never even seen the far side of the moon when this proposition was made.
Exactly.
Just point that out.
Exactly, Dan.
They could be up to anything.
Yeah. Who knows what they're up to, those goddamn communists. I forget what it's called, so there's going to be no point in me bringing this up, but I'm going to bring it up anyways, is that I found a more simplified free version of Warhammer 40k Tabletop. Just the rules. It's like basically like a one-page version of all of the rules. It looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. I'm going to say. All right. Anything else on McNamara?
Nah.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much the feeling. McNamara. Poor guy. Well, we will be back next week. Mm-hmm. We will hopefully be talking about the book. And we will be, let's just say, opening our third eye. Perhaps. Our third eye will be open. And we'll learn about...
And yours too, perhaps.
And yours too, dear listener. And we'll perhaps be learning about the real villains of the post-war era and who those people might have been and why we should dismantle on the first day of the revolution Yale brick by brick. That's operation number 1. First things first, get rid of Yale. Yale's gone. No more Yaleys coming out of that part of the country.
I'm definitely on board.
We'll move on to Eton.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my name's been Jack. That was very fun. And thank you so much for listening.
My name has been Dan. It's been a great pleasure once again. Woo! You've made it to the end of the podcast. Congratulations.
Congratulations. We'll see you next time. The music you heard this episode was Music to Kill Bad People To by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like this song, you can check it out and much, much more on their Bandcamp at kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. Be sure and follow us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you like what you heard, be sure and tune in next week for some more commie discussion. Till next time.